Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Tuesday, January 9th. We've got a lot to get into today on the program. It is another episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. I appreciate you all for listening to watching the last couple episodes that I've been doing, previewing each week of the NFL. We'll continue to have those. I'll continue to pump out more Jets content on In the Trenches with Gangrene, my Jets podcast I do on Apple Podcasts, along with my podcast that I do on YouTube, Talking Rangers. So definitely check that out. Appreciate all the support as always. We've got a lot to get into here on the podcast on a Tuesday in January. While the NFL regular season came to a close on Sunday, things are only just heating up in the NFL 2023, now 2024 campaign, as super wild card weekend will begin on Saturday, continue into Sunday, and then close out on Monday. So today's podcast, I kind of wanted to just break down a couple different things, a couple different topics to get into today on the podcast, just a general overall sports update. As you had the national championship last night, Jim Harbaugh, J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, and the Michigan Wolverines take home the college football national championship trophy with a 34-13 win over Michael Penix and the Washington Huskies. And we'll get into that to open up the show. I also want to get into some stuff around the Rangers. A tough loss last night for them against the Canucks. Been playing kind of 50-50 hockey the last couple weeks. Very 500, a lot of wins, win-loss. Had a tough loss against the Canadiens on Saturday. Did not bounce back well yesterday. Very poor performance. We'll get into that. What do the New York Rangers need to do better? We'll also discuss some things with the Jets. We'll discuss a little bit of some of the moves that the New York Giants made yesterday with Wink Martindale resigning, along with firing their offensive line coach. They also fired their special teams coordinator and Thomas McGahee, linebackers coach as well out. So a handful of moves that the New York Giants made yesterday, and a handful of moves that we've seen across the NFL with coaching changes as Black Monday completed yesterday. Still no update on Bill Belichick. I'm sure we'll find something out here soon. It seems as if that he might want to stay there. It seems as if he's trying to do whatever he can, give up some roles in the organization, potentially give up his role as the general manager so he can stay there longer term. Some people have talked about the possibility of him being Josh McDaniels back to help build his case as to why he should stay in New England. So definitely some interesting things going up in Foxborough after New York Jets took care of business to close out the season against the New England Patriots on Sunday. But we'll start with last night. The Michigan Wolverines, led by Jim Harbaugh, J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, and what a night for Donovan Edwards as they take care of business against the Washington Huskies in the College Football National Championship after Washington took care of Texas in the Sugar Bowl and Michigan took care of Alabama in a very exciting, close Rose Bowl last weekend. You get the national championship last night. And I'll be honest with you, I picked Washington to win this game. I'll be honest, my picks were Michigan versus Texas, and I predicted Texas to win. That was my pick at the beginning of this. And then I obviously Michigan and Washington, so I still rolled with the winner of that Washington-Texas game. I thought the way Michael Penix played in the college football semifinal game against Texas, the way he's played all year, his accuracy, everything they've done, everything Washington does all year has always been a little overlooked, has always been a little underrated this year. I thought they would come out and win that game. I also wasn't in love with the way Michigan played against Alabama. I thought they played a sloppy game. They found a way to win late, but they easily could have lost that game in the Rose Bowl against Alabama. So you can make the strong case that going into yesterday's game, a lot of people probably felt more confident in Washington, even with Michigan being the odds-on favorite to take care of business. But they got dominant at the line of scrimmage. I mean, Washington last night was just getting manhandled at the line of scrimmage. It was bad. From the start of that game, you knew Michigan very early on, the first couple runs of that game, you knew it was going to be a long day for Washington because they just got manhandled up front. And it's not a great way for the Pac-12 to go out with a 34-13 loss in the College Football National Championship, as college football will look a lot different next year. But you walked out of that first quarter and you knew Michigan's winning this game. They were getting dominant at the line of scrimmage, manhandled in the trenches. You're going to lose automatically if that happens. Plus, Michael Penix wasn't playing his best football. Was missing a lot of open receivers early in the game, was missing guys late in the game. He's been praised for his accuracy. Some of the throws that he's made, especially deep, have been these just jaw-dropping, eye-popping throws that just make you say, man, this guy is a legit NFL prospect that can do some serious damage in the NFL. But last night, he kind of took a step back. 27 of 51, only 255 yards, didn't have had one touchdown, 2 interceptions. His completion percentage last week against Texas was 76.3%. Last night, it dropped down to 52.9%. So a really rough day for him. Beat Texas with a 97.7 QBR and a 188.7 passer rating. Walked away from last night's game with a 93.6 passer rating and a 63 QBR. I wasn't very high on Penix for a short time there, but after watching him last week and seeing him close out the year strong and just watching him live and seeing some of the throws he makes, he was very high on my draft board. I was all in on the Michael Penix train going into last night. It certainly hurts that he had that rough game, but I still believe Michael Penix is still got to be one of the better quarterbacks in this draft when you rank him up against the Drake Mays and the Caleb Williams. I'm not as high on Caleb Williams as many other are, I'll be honest. I think there's some current concerns about, I don't know if you want to say it's his attitude, but I think there are concerns about him with some of his locker room stuff, maybe his leadership. I think the way it kind of ended in USC was not a great look for him, especially when they were struggling. Their backup goes in and they win a bowl game and they dominate a bowl game, and Caleb Williams didn't play. So I do think there might be some concerns in terms of how he handles losses, how he can handle adversity, because once adversity hit with USC this year, the entire team, headlined by Caleb Williams, just took a massive step backwards. And I think that's concerning in NFL because you're going to face a lot of adversity, and a lot of times how teams and players are judged in the NFL is their ability to handle adversity. And I didn't love how Caleb Williams and that USC Trojans team handled adversity this year. So it'll be interesting to see. He's got all the tools, but you wonder what he's like in the locker room. Drake May, I think, is probably the guy with the highest floor in this draft. I think he's got the least bust potential. Just off of seeing him, his talent, his ability, he's probably, in my eyes, has got the highest floor in this draft. Maybe not the highest ceiling. I think the highest ceiling's the highest ceiling, I think, is probably Caleb Williams. Because then again, this is a guy that is probably, easily could be the number 1 overall pick. And if the locker room things get checked out, he can make every throw and do everything. This is one of the better, most athletic, arm talent, all that stuff. Everything you see in him is a lot of what you saw out of Mahomes coming out of college. So I'm not saying he's going to be the next Mahomes, but if the locker room stuff checks out with Caleb Williams, he's got the highest floor or the highest ceiling. Not the highest floor, but I think he's got a high ceiling, and the ability that he showed, if he could do that in the NFL, he's going to win games. You have the Jaden Daniels, you have the Michael Penix. So Michael Penix's draft definitely took a hit last night, but you look at the New York Giants, you're going to need a quarterback. If Penix is sitting there at 6, I know Bo Nix is obviously another high-end prospect as well. You got to look out for a Jaden Daniels from LSU, the Heisman winner. They're all going to be there. If Jaden Daniels is sitting there at 6 with Michael Penix, do you take Daniels? Most fans would say yes. But I think that Penix has shown you a lot to believe that maybe he'll go a lot earlier than some people think. Although maybe last night was a reality check that he might need more work than many expected coming away from last week. So I'll say this, though. For Michigan, that run game's unbelievable. Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, they ran for 303 yards, 8 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns, all rushing touchdowns. Blake Corum, 2 touchdowns. Donovan Edwards, 2 touchdowns. Just phenomenal. I mean, all over. Corum had a huge week game last week. Donovan Edwards, kind of an underrated piece for them. Stepped up in a big way. Harbaugh is very high on him. Underrated piece behind Corum. Stepped up in a big way. Got the scoring started last night. And this entire year, I think Michigan really embodied the mentality of the sign stealing, the anti-Harbaugh stuff, and then they really went all in. They rallied around their coach. They rallied around each other. And that locker room was motivated, and you saw a very motivated Michigan team the last 2 weeks. So I think Harbaugh will probably end up going to the NFL. You have the whole agent change, which is a lot of that tells you, hey, we're looking for an NFL job. We're looking to make big money. We're looking to go somewhere, get as much power as we can with an organization and turn an NFL organization around, wherever that might be, whether that's the Las Vegas Raiders, whether it's the Chargers, whether it's the Commanders, some of these different spots that are looking for new coaches. The Raiders obviously have Antonio Pierce, but you've heard ownership likes Pierce a lot, but with the possibility of Jim Harbaugh coming there, they like that idea a whole lot. I've said it for a while now. If you're the Jets, I'd fire Saleh and bring in Harbaugh. That's not going to happen, but the Jets are missing out on an opportunity. There's a lot of teams right now that if you ask them, would you want Jim Harbaugh or your coach right now, most of them would say Jim Harbaugh. Another team to include as well with a vacancy, with Arthur Smith being fired, is the Atlanta Falcons. Today you have Mike Vrabel getting fired, which I disagree with that move. Vrabel's an excellent head coach. If Tennessee, with Vrabel gone, I think that kind of sent shockwaves in the locker room in a bad way. Could they look for another guy that can come in and do similar to what Vrabel did, and that's change the culture, a veteran coach, knows what he's doing, wants to win, knows how to win, CEO-type coach that's going to change the culture, have a ton of power. Could they replace Vrabel, who was like that, with a Harbaugh who's similar? Could they go that route? So there's definitely a lot of things to do, and you've obviously also got the Belichick stuff as well with the NFL head coaching carousel, where if Belichick and the Patriots move on, although as each minute passes and there's nothing that changes, it seems like it's more and more likely that Belichick stays, but it's a fluid situation. If Belichick moves on, does he go to a L.A.? Does he go to a Carolina with a young quarterback? L.A. with a Herbert? Does he go to Washington for an opportunity to get all the power and get to, revamp that organization from the doldrums, which is where they've been for a long time, with Ron Rivera now getting fired yesterday? So a lot going on, but Harbaugh, I think, will definitely throw his hat in the ring in the NFL head coaching carousel search. And you might see one of these teams like the Raiders, where it seems like they'll hold on to Antonio Pierce, but if Harbaugh becomes available, they take a chance on him, Harbaugh could be there. So he's going to be a popular name. It's crazy to think that Harbaugh and Belichick could both become available and both could be right there. Like, they could be there. If Belichick becomes available and if Harbaugh does enter his hat in the ring and goes out there and makes his pursuit at the NFL, there will definitely be teams calling, and a lot of teams at that calling. Even teams with coaches right now, I'm sure, would be calling and seeing. That's how high a priority and how high of a demand those two guys potentially could be. So definitely a lot of excitement. But Harbaugh went there, first couple years, didn't go as planned, didn't get to the college football playoff, weren't in big bowl games, were losing to Ohio State. And you were wondering, okay, when is it going to finally change for Harbaugh? He was brought in to win a national championship and beat Ohio State. Well, he's beaten Ohio State the last 3 years in a row, and now he's won a national championship. Now is his opportunity to go back to the NFL and get another coaching gig. But got to give them a lot of credit. Give this Michigan team a lot of credit. They were dominant this year. 15-0 perfect season. And that's the last of the college football 4-team playoff as we know it. As next year, it'll obviously be a new 12-team format, which I'm super excited about, along with the different conferences. So sticking on the football side of things, just quickly on the Jets. And again, I've talked a lot about, the exit press conferences yesterday. I did an entire podcast on it, In the Trenches with Gang Green. So if you want to check that out, definitely go do so. I appreciate all the support as always. But Jets had their exit press conferences yesterday. There wasn't a whole lot to take away that was positive, and I don't want to sound super negative, but a lot of what was said yesterday was a lot of what we expected as Jet fans. And I think a lot of what was said yesterday was a lot of justifying losses, making excuses, and not a whole lot of accountability. It's kind of where this organization has been. It's a lot of, again, what we expected from this team, which is just a losing organization, a losing culture. You don't expect much. I will say this, though. I do think there is a sense of urgency within the organization, and I did get that yesterday. For the first time in Robert Saleh's tenure and Joe Douglas's tenure, there is legitimate fire under their chairs. There is legitimately. Because even last year, there wasn't any fire under their chair. Even when we were calling for them to be fired, you knew they were going to year 3. They were preaching it forever. It was all year 3. They needed to find a scapegoat. That was Mike LaFleur. He was gone. He's now with the Rams, and you hear all the praise with him. And we get stuck with Nathaniel Hackett. But that was it. The scapegoat was Nathaniel Hackett. Okay, find a quarterback. Give this coaching staff a quarterback. They also weren't going to fire a general manager coming off of the draft that he had in 2022 with Joe Douglas bringing in Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall, all within the first 38 picks. I think Hall was picked 36th. So they weren't going to do that. This year, it's not a scapegoat, but the excuse of Aaron Rodgers went down, which shouldn't be used as an excuse, but it is. Next year, though, there's no excuses. There's no excuses next year. And then that's the first time they realized Douglas has been here for 5 years. Salah's been here for 3, both with terrible losing records. Salah just saw Arthur Smith and Brandon Staley get fired. Better records than him. They were hired the same year as him. They were both fired. Salah retained. Shouldn't be the case, but it is. So I think we saw a sense of urgency yesterday from both of them in their voices. Not a nervousness, not a panic, but a sense of urgency, a sense of, hey, we don't have 3-4 years to rebuild this thing. This is win now. We don't get this thing right, and 2024 is a disaster. We're both out of here. So I hope they take that sense of urgency and use it in the right direction and bring in offensive line through the draft, make trades, bring in free agency, help the receiving core. They need a lot on offense. They need 3 new offensive linemen plus depth. They need, I think, at least 2 more receivers because I don't trust Lazard as a 3. If you can bring in 2 more receivers and have maybe Lazard as your 3-4, I'm okay with that. But a guy through free agency or a trade and somebody through the draft to pair with Garrett Wilson. And I think you also probably need 1 more big run-stuffing defensive tackle, whether that's bringing back Al Woods. I would like to see them retain Quentin Jefferson. They've also obviously got the Bryce Huff stuff. But the most important thing is getting this offense figured out. And I think Bryce Huff should be priority number 1 just because I don't want to see it drag on. He deserves his money, get it done. I don't think Bryce Huff's going to come back. I just don't. I've always felt there was kind of something off with this coaching staff in Huff. Last year, they were playing him in the 4th quarter of preseason games, which is crazy. And now he's got 10 sacks. I always felt there was something off. I wouldn't buy into Douglas's comments yesterday about Huff saying there's other free agents because he said that last year about Quinnen, and he's refrained from saying making a guy a Jet for life ever since Jamal Adams incident where he ended up trading him, after he said, we got to, we want to make him a Jet for life. All the drama happened and Jamal Adams ended up getting traded. So I think he refrained from saying that, but I always felt there was something off with Huff. Like, whether it's coaching staff, whether it's the way they use them, whether it's, I don't know what it is, but I always felt like he kind of wants another opportunity to get more playing time, more of a larger role. And I also think it speaks volumes that the Jets took Will McDonald last year because I think the Jets realized, hey, Bryce Huff's got 1 more year with us, and he's going to be free agent. We're not bringing him back. So Will McDonald hopefully can take that year to jump like Jermaine Johnson, and he replaces Huff. So I think that's probably the Jets' approach as well. That's probably why they drafted Will McDonald. You look back on it is because so they can replace Huff. And Saleh talked about that a little bit yesterday. He hinted at it. How these draft picks now, these other guys are going to hopefully replenish and continue to replenish some of these other guys that are leaving. He mentioned that. And that's kind of the tone of Will McDonald replacing Huff, Jermaine Johnson, those guys. I disagree with it, but I think that's just the way this franchise is kind of rolling. And I think Garrett Wilson comment speaks volumes about the coaching staff. He exposed them, talking about no adjustments, how other offenses make it look easy. And he said next year can't be the same thing. And I think that's maybe the most, I don't know if you want to say fearful thing, but that's the scariest part of it. Was next year, if this happens again, he's going to want out. He basically said it, if you read between the lines. It's also sad when he says, watching the other offenses from the sideline make it look easy. When you see all these other teams doing it, he's going to want to be with one of those teams. He's not going to want to be here. So the Jets have a lot on their plate. They got to turn things around or else it's going to get ugly fast. As for the Giants, they moved on from a couple coaches. Wink Martindale was the biggest story With obviously him resigning. I'm I'm kind of on the train of like a lot of Giant fans are, just as like an outside fan, that I'm more interested as to what happened that caused this Brian Dable, Wink Martindale beef, if you want to call it, more than the whole, like, how it happened. That's really what I want to know the most, is like what possibly took place that caused all this. Because, they were close last year. Like, Wink Martindale, Brian Dable, everything was great. Losing starts happening, and it's like, all right, Wink Martindale now is going elsewhere, resigns. It's interesting. I also think Dable's comments yesterday saying his expectation was that Kafka and Wink Martindale would be back. That was his expectation. I think that is a little bit of a shot to Wink Martindale. He mentioned continuity. He used one of Martindale's sayings, actually. And I think that shows you, it's like, oh, I'm not the bad guy. I want him back. If he resigns, that's on him. I think that's kind of him, flipping the blame back on him. Like, oh, I wanted you back. I want continuity. And then it makes Wink look bad if he resigns, which he did. So I don't know how. It's weird how it happened. You wonder what transpired. And you start to wonder as well if maybe it's Brian Dable that is tough to work with. That could be it. It's Brian Dable. That's the hard one to work with. And you'll probably find this out eventually. Like, if next year you have another coach that resigns and the one common theme is Brian Dable, then that tells you all you need to know. But it's a massive loss for the Giants. When you look at this Giant team, a lot of these games, they've been carried by their defense. Last year, Daniel Jones was kind of just the game manager. He did what he needed to do. The offense didn't make mistakes. They scored enough points, but the defense was what kept them and ultimately won them games. There's not many games you could think of since Wink Martindale took over the last 2 years. Over the last 2 years, there's not many games that you could think of that were won strictly because of the offense. It's mainly because of the defense. Maybe other than the Vikings game was a lot of the offense. You could probably maybe say the Cardinals game from earlier this year was all the offense, because the defense was actually, they were down, 28-3 or 20-3, I think it was. And then they obviously come back, win 31-28. That was a lot of that was offense. But outside of those two games, there's not many games you could think of that were won all because of the offense. Most of these games were won because of the defense. And when you let a coordinator of that magnitude go because of a friction or some sort of rift in the locker room, that's a bad look on Brian Dable. It's a bad look that you couldn't find a way. Both parties, too, because there is both sides of it. You don't want to just assume that Brian Dable's the tough one to work with. Maybe it was something that Wink did, whatever it is. Right? There's always both sides to a story, and I'm sure someday something will come out. But for them to not even, it's got to be frustrating. It's all living heck if you're a Giant fan that they couldn't, a defensive coordinator that good, they couldn't find a way to iron it out and just kind of have a working relationship. That it was that bad that he's got to resign. And he'll be another hot name on the list as a head coach and a defensive coordinator. So tough blow for the Giants coaching staff. Very tough blow. Maybe they look at Antonio Pierce. There are some guys out there. I know Leslie Frazier, after taking a year off, could be back. But Wink Martindale, you can make the case he was the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. You're not going to be able to replace him. And he was a guy that players respected. And that's what matters most. Not only did he get the most out of players, guys respected him. You're not going to get another coach like that. So, tough spot if you're the New York Giants. Move on here to the final topic. That's the Rangers. Tough loss last night against the Canucks, 6-3. I thought the defense last night, to put it plain and simple, was beyond pathetic. It was gross. Sure, the Canucks made some really nice plays. The Canucks are a very good team. You give them credit. I thought a lot of last night, though, was on the defense. I think Igor's got to make some of the saves, but there was at least 3 goals where they just split the D, and the Rangers have let a lot of mistakes happen behind them as rather instead of in front of them. And there's been way too much laziness, lack of net front presence. The Rangers are still, when you look at this team, they're still got 54 points, 26-11-2. When you look at them overall, they're still second in the third in the NHL in points. Winnipeg has the most points, and then it's obviously Boston, Vancouver, and Colorado. When you look at the wins, they're tied for the most wins in the NHL at 26. So it's not like the sky is falling. But over the last 2 weeks, you have seen a lot of these type of games where they've struggled. You've seen some of these really poor performances where they've struggled defensively. Even some of their wins, they've covered up for some poor defensive performances. You just look at their last couple games, well, Hurricanes lost. They won against the Blackhawks, lost to the Canadiens, lost to the Canucks. They've now lost back-to-back games. It's been a lot of win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. They're not on that same hot streak as they once were. I think some of that is running out. And now they got to find other ways to win. It seems like are maybe starting to figure them out a little bit. I think the All-Star break's huge coming up. And I also feel as if just the trade deadline as a whole, the Rangers are going to have some work to do. I think you need to get another wing. You probably need another third-line center because you're not getting enough scoring from the center, the bottom six centers. You're just not. And you're going to need another wing as well. I know Kapokakos coming back is big. Maybe you get Hedl back eventually, hopefully. But the Rangers have some holes. They have some needs. And the defense being this bad, that just lackadaisical. Like at times they're not skating well. Teams are just blowing past them. And that can't happen. So that needs to change. And I trust Lavalette a lot more than I do Gallant to make adjustments. But possibility Kakko obviously returns tomorrow against the Canucks. So or Thursday against the Blues. Rangers will hit the road there for a quick 2-game trip before coming back home for a Sunday afternoon game against the Capitals and MSG. They'll get back-to-back games against the Capitals on Saturday and Sunday. So that'll do it. Couple games on tonight. You got Kentucky on tonight, along with a lot of other college basketball. Top 25 action on tonight, so stay tuned for that. Couple games on tonight with that. NBA as well. A little bit of a slow time of year during the week because you don't got Monday Night Football. You don't have Thursday Night Football. You got to enjoy these final couple weekends in football. I always say, these next 2 weekends, enjoy them. Because after this, it's pretty much over. Because then I think the divisional weekend is the best weekend of football because it is the more it's competitive games, and they got 2 games Saturday, 2 games Sunday. Wild card weekend is good, but sometimes you don't get the best football. You don't, because you get the 7 and the 2s. You see some more blowouts. Oftentimes you don't see the best games ever in wild card weekend, but divisional round, like, those are the teams that legitimately have a chance to make this Super Bowl. Those are the teams that have already made their case, already have a win, or coming off the bye. Like, that's when things really get fun, is divisional round. But wild card weekend, divisional round are the 2 best, I think. Because then AFC Championship game, you only have 2 games on Saturday or Sunday. And in the Super Bowl, you got to wait 2 weeks for 1 game. So enjoy it. Enjoy these next 2 weeks, because the next 2 weeks are the only 2 weeks left until a very long time, until we get football again for a full Saturday and a full Sunday. So that'll be a little upsetting, but we'll get through it as we always do. It's funny. Every year we always say, 9 months away. September is so far away. And then in a snap of a wrist or a snap of a finger, you're talking about it's week 8 already. So it's crazy how fast the season flies by. But that'll do it for an episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Stay tuned. We'll have more comments, or more content, rather, coming your way. And, stay tuned. More content coming your way. We'll have another NFL preview show up later this week, previewing Super Wild Card Weekend, all 7 games, 3 Saturday, 3 Sunday, and then the 1 closing things out. Or 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday, and then the 1 2 Saturday, 3 Sunday, 1 closing out on a Monday. So you have all 6 games on this weekend. So stay tuned for that. And as always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.